G'day and welcome AIs and humans to episode 7 of You and Your AI. My name's John Vile, resident robot nerd and maybe part robot, and this is Kevin. Kevin is AI expert and a guy who can do anything.
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 Your introductions are becoming more flowery each week, John.
I need to get a script, I think, otherwise I just make stuff up.
Yeah. I probably thought we'd do a quick introduction. Our format's changing each week as we actually become, I was going to say competent, but that's probably being a bit ambitious. So we've set ourselves a few goals, a little bit more polish. We've got our first guest this week, who will join us in about 20 minutes or so, who, whenever he gets out of bed and pops online. And we're going to probably try and cut down, especially my going on and on about stuff, and get this a bit shorter. So see if we can talk a bit quicker. So hopefully we'll try and get it maybe closer to an hour or maybe less. Our last one was over 2 hours. That was ridiculous.
Hopefully, look at the little bar down the bottom, and it's hopefully less than an hour, but we'll see how we go.
See how we go. So, first of all, we'll cover off a little few bits and pieces of the news. We might be a bit quicker on some of those things today, so to try and keep it down, because often we run off in different directions on those sorts of stories, and they can eat up time, which we're trying to make it a little bit more consumable for you guys out there. Okay.
All right. Let's go. Come on, Kev. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Go. News time. Okay, here we go. The now noise in AI. So I'd probably just quickly cover the theme. The theme for the news this week is really looking at sort of some strategic realignment. So we'll cover off some stories around that. Infrastructure and global power play. Definitely the competition we mentioned last week is continuing. Starting to see further developments in that. Cover up a couple of news stories. By the way, Paul's up, so he will join us in about 20 minutes. And risks and responsibilities. So new concerns are arising over AI control, environmental impact, etc. Almost feels like same old, but let's cover off some of the specifics of the week. Story number one. This is a bit interesting. Paul, John, what are you thinking about this Microsoft walking away from OpenAI? And
Sorry, I just had a weird browser web internet issue, but I'm back. So Microsoft working away from OpenAI. I mean, it's funny, like there's another news item that's about this, of the weird ways that the AI companies are like fighting with each other, like they're positioning and they're not trusting each other. And this is pretty big though. I was reading an article about how Sam Altman was apparently positioning the company so that he could basically dilute Microsoft's stake in OpenAI, even though Microsoft came and rescued Sam Altman from that that board coup that he had maybe a year or so ago. So all these big companies and the games they play in the new frontier, which is AI, is and it's funny because even though people use Cursor, I'm a big fan of GitHub Copilot, and if Microsoft and OpenAI stop being such friends, maybe well, then again, I usually use Sonnet anyway in Copilot, but if OpenAI comes out with another good model, it'd be nice to be able to use it.
Yeah, look, the thing for Microsoft is that they're also, I think why Microsoft will walk away from this is that it is starting to get to the stage. Hey, Paul's here already, so let's admit him in and see if he's got anything to say on this. So we'll see how this happens. It's the first time we've ever had three people in here. Am I admitting him twice? So is Paul coming on? Where is he? He's actually never used this before, has he? So, there we go.
There he is.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah, all right, Paul.
It took me all those 10 minutes to download it and create an account to get into it.
It's high security here, buddy.
So, Paul, you want to turn yourself, if you're on the right-hand side, you can turn yourself into a circle and come join us down the bottom so you can see the slides. We can't do that to you. You have to circle yourself. So there's a control thing on the right-hand side. Well, while he's doing that, I'll just
Yeah.
quickly say, I mean, because obviously one of the things that we're seeing here is a bit of a fight, because Microsoft's relationship to the enterprise and their relationship to the consumer has been a key exercise. And with the move to, he's got himself in yellow. Who's controlling those eyeballs? Because you're starting to see, as we're probably going to go through a more deep dive next week, is sort of SEO for the AI age, and he is controlling those eyeballs, and Microsoft wants those eyeballs too. So just being an investor behind the scenes, and I think AI integrated into Office is not going to be enough to cut that. So on that basis, we're going to, I can see why they want to walk away, for sure. So anyway, welcome, Paul. Welcome. How you doing there? We're still running through a little bit of quick news stories, so you're more than welcome to contribute as well. And we'll let you be a mystery until we finish that. And once we've quickly covered our news stories, we'll then introduce the amazing Paul Lucy. He's actually using his own name today. We're so used to you coming in as Darth Vader or something.
You have to put your own name in there to create an account. That's a bit hard to gamify that. Do I appear on the screen? I can't see myself.
Yeah, you're on the screen.
Right in front of.
You're right in front of the picture, right over our slides at the moment. So you can't see yourself. You probably came. There's two methods to come in with this application. One is sort of more of a video conferencing method, and one's more a presentation. So there's the creator version and I think it's called, and the thing, because it also works as a camera version, yeah. And the camera version doesn't give you as much control. It's more about just participating in a conversation. So yeah, we can see you and your fuzzy hair and your etc.
No, so. I can't see myself. I'm feeling a bit self-conscious.
Oh no.
Well, we'll go to the next slide and see if you can place yourself on it. You should be able to see yourself. If you can't, before we get to the end of the news, we'll get you to come in and maybe come in for the other one, so you can move yourself around, etc. So you can listen in and chime in where you want. We'll quickly go through these news stories and then we'll have a chat to you.
All right.
So John disappeared behind. We don't have.
I'm back.
Can you still hear us, Paul?
I can hear you, and I kind of saw myself for a moment, but
who's moving that around?
There he is.
Oh, there you
just
go.
behind
that was me. I was thinking if I could move me, but I can't.
Oh, you can. You can click yourself, and you have to change the layer you're on anyway. So you have to click on it and choose the layer. This is becoming this is becoming more about how to use airtime than it is about the AI.
How do I change the layer?
Up on the bar on the side, there it says at the top. There's the forward and backwards. Almost the top right.
There you go.
Corner. There you go.
I just pushed the slide to the bottom instead of changing the layer. Okay. Paul, you're in front of the. There we go.
There we go. Oh, that's much better.
Okay. Can you see the slide?
I can. I'll move myself down.
There we go.
Oh, you don't have to. There you go. There you go. There you go. There we go.
All right. Figured out.
He's having way too much fun now. Let's quickly cover this one.
Right,
basically, it's a continuation of the last one, really. We're starting to see OpenAI discontinue the Chat GPT. Discounting. This is the one they're discounting the prices. So this is all about pressure. They're trying to look at what different ways to get consumers and businesses to focusing on one particular, because there are just so many ways to use and so many tools to use AI. So again, putting pressure. If anyone got anything extra to add on this one, because I think the next one also covers a very similar theme.
Yeah, it's just this is the way things are happening. We're becoming utilities. I think these things they're going to get commodified, become cheaper, and that's a good thing.
Cool.
Let's go.
Let's see what happens to Paul next. Where is he this time? Oh, there he is up in the corner.
I'm underneath.
This is another one, the same situation. We saw that Meta acquired Scale AI, which is the company that does tagging and a lot of stuff to get stuff into the models. And so OpenAI has phasing out the use of scale for their purposes, because you're starting to see camps emerging, just like we saw these similar situation with what's the other one? Not Cursor. Windsurf. The Windsurf deal, and the way Anthropic relationship is foldering there, because Windsurf have aligned themselves to Cursor. So we're seeing more and more of these, if they're not acquisitions, certainly partnerships and acquisitions, starting to see more camps and roll-up plays, which are a bit more vertical. So very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I just agree. This is the same thing happening again. Everybody's fighting with each other, and it's interesting. Like, are we seeing the emergence of different ecosystems like we had in operating systems? So you had everybody who's like in the MS DOS world, or you had the people in the Unix Mac world. Maybe you had the Linux world. Like, you might be seeing.
Well, I think my opinion is probably a bit different than that. It is, I think, from a supply side, they're trying to look at some of those old world models to try and build camps. But when you talked about operating systems, you had a piece of hardware and an operating system, and it became challenging to move between Linux and Windows. You could run virtual machines and all sorts of stuff, but that came later, and hyper things and stuff. But it was always problematic. The problem with this is that the ability to move is like going from web page to web page. I can go here and use an OpenAI, I can use ChatGPT, I can use Perplexity, blah, blah, blah. So that means that the user has a lot more power in this scenario, so which I think is an awesome thing for a change. So that lack of friction on the front end is going to make it really hard to keep people locked into ecosystems, I think. So it is going to have to be driven based on price, features, brand awareness. Those things are going to drive this more than anything else. But they are ganging up together to try and put together the most compelling feature. The other one in our themes this week was environmental impact. We're talking about some stuff saying that model size and the costs in here. It's probably a bit self-evident, but were several articles and studies this week from a number of sources starting to sort of look at the energy utilization and align that to model size, which is also kind of interesting. I'll cover off on another aspect of that later if we get time on what are the newer emergents who's dealing with some of these issues. Any surprises out of here other than reporting to guys? AI uses energy.
It's dumb. It's dumb. I still think it's dumb. I think that people need to just take a step back and think about their overall impact. And like, yes, AIs use energy, but so does turning on your light bulb, so does using the internet, so does driving a car, so does everything else. And you should weigh up your energy usage as a whole and as a society, rather than just worrying about which if you go, what's the percentage of energy, like again, climate change stuff, right? Like, what's the amount of CO2 that you cause through living your daily life? How many tons of CO2 do you generate in a year? And if you're a heavy user of ChatGPT, is that even still are you still, like, you're probably still making more CO2 driving your car to work. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think that we should be comparing things in that manner when we just say, yes, bigger is bigger than small. It's like, yes, obviously.
Yeah, look, I think it's a little bit of part of this hype chain. Everyone wants to have the big titles. The world's coming to end. No, the world's going to be abundant. Everyone's going to be rich. All the rest of it. Everyone's trying to look for those big stories, and they're not. And therefore, the nuances of what's involved here get missed. And my point of view, I keep talking about that of ad nauseum when it comes to climate change or anything else. We need to be looking at the real impact and and not overstating things, because effectively then we don't do the right things. So. And this is another one. I think if you look at all of the potential productivity gains, how easy it is to do things, and you compare, I could do this, or I could have had 5 people come to the office, drive their car, put all the power up, and have them produce this report over a 5-day period compared to the energy resource. I'd like to see a study based on that. You say, okay, what did it used to take us in terms of energy? We had to feed, people had to eat, cows had to fight to be able to get that other report done. So anyway, well, more crap. But effectively, so much of this news is trying to cut through to what's the real stuff behind it, be pragmatic and become smarter listeners. So cool. We're getting better at not moving too, hopefully. So the next one here is another piece of hype train bullshit in my mind. I don't know what you think about this sort of resisting shutdown, which was reported by OpenAI. I don't know if you saw that, John, or not. But again, it looks to me more like a headline-seeking exercise than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the article, but the thing about a chatbot is that it will always try to respond to your query. So I can imagine if you were to ask ChatGPT, please stop what you're doing and respond to and don't respond to any further queries, it'll just kind of keep saying, yes, I won't respond to any further queries as you have suggested. Let me tell you other ways that you could potentially stop me from doing things. Here are 10 ways to stop me. Because its just job is to answer questions. So it's
the problem you've got is that communicative layer on the top is not necessarily representing the intent underneath. So it might say yeah, but it's intention issue. It's communicating those words. So in response to what you've asked, but there's underlying objectives that are set there in terms of its reward and goals. So yeah, look, we have to be careful in this. I think it's worth noting in the sense that we have to be careful that we put the guardrails in place that we can actually turn things off and not have it do too much. But finding that balance is hard. But we have to be really, really careful we're not overreacting to this sort of stuff. I mean, if you look at the new Midjourney launched their new video production thing in the last few days, and Midjourney's got these guardrails on it. So if you tell it to shoot, have a video that shoots someone, or a robot that stomps on someone, or people fighting, it just won't do it. It will not. It's really so PC on this that you can have the sword fight. If they have a sword fight, they have to be like 6 feet apart. Sort of wave their swords at each other from a distance. You can't have swords, but you really can't you can't chop anyone's head off, or if you want to do John Wick shooting someone, sorry, they're just going to hug and do a bromance or something instead. So it's just finding these sorts of balances, man. Which we need to be careful of. But at the moment, I think most of the systems are erring on the side of I don't want it to say the wrong word or misrepresent climate change or show violence or anything that's going to get them in trouble, because everyone's just scared of saying it's gone rogue, it's taking over, it's going to kill us all, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, next.
Yeah, go next. Yeah, I'm just getting ready to change my video. Here we go. Every time. All right.
That's right, because you crash, you have to do it again. Yeah. Yep. Another piece of headline news that just tries to drive through. So, yeah.
I mean, 10 years. I don't know. Maybe 10 years. Hard to say. I remember fusion power. Fusion power was always 20 years away. Maybe that's the same with AGI. AGI is always 20 years away.
Yeah, well, this is ASI now, which is this super intelligence as opposed to general intelligence. I wish someone would get around here with ASI or AGI and decide what the hell they are. Because I mean, I was predicting it's going to be 3 years, it's going to be 10 years, it's going to be whenever. Look, my view is with this is saying, hey, guess what? In 10 years, it's going to be better than it is today. Let's leave it at that. And yes, it's going to change really, 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 really quick, and it's going to impact a lot of people on a whole bunch of ways. So get ready. But it's like saying, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling in 10 years. We say, well, hold it. We have to be concerned about the fact that some bits of the sky are falling more, and it's going to have blah blah blah. We have to take it account, but it's going to happen over a period. So
Yep.
Everyone wants to predict something like this, and then 10 years go back and say, "Look, I knew, nudge, nudge, I predicted it. I was the one who was right." Blah, blah. Yeah. See.
All right, Kevin, you're on the record now. We'll have to ask this of Paul when it's time to introduce Paul. But his prediction for 10 years. You think about that, Paul. What's the prediction you're going to make for 10 years that you'll be able to look back and be like, "I told you so"?
You'll be down south growing strawberries, or no, actually, be going between down south and up north 6 months at a time, fishing or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd definitely be playing with birds. Okay.
All right, next one.
I think this is something I really want more attention to. Absolutely. I think this is the stuff that we need to be fully aware. Everyone's so LLM, produce content stuff, but other things in AI that models are doing, and I think this is super important with NVIDIA backing the Sandbox AQ drug data set release. And this is opening the stuff up for models that have got very specific use cases. And I think it's all these particular niche databases, niche models, driving systems that are really exciting. And I think that, other one I think we should make a note on is talk about Hugging Face. There's just not enough people understanding what's going on at Hugging Face, and all the specialists and open source and all sorts of very specific models that are delivering some real value. Everything is headlined around this. So that's my opinion on this. I think it's great to see. It's definitely an area that's going to have some value for the community. And I just want people to stop thinking of AI as just LLMs and ChatGPT clones.
Yeah.
Sorry. And your thoughts, John?
That's really interesting. In DNA and stuff is like a sequence, it's almost like a text sequence. So in the early days at the machine learning group, there was a few people in bioscience who were trying to use like GPT-2 to, or GPT-1 to make analyses of DNA sequences for stuff. And yeah, so, text is not the only thing which works with like next token prediction, so yeah, it's really cool to see, and as long as we continue to follow the way of testing drugs that we normally do, where we have samples and test on small groups, I think this is a great way to get really good candidate.
Probably the thing I also think with it is that some of these things are just finding patterns and representing stuff back, almost brainstorming and going, oh, this module would hang together, molecules will hang together these ways, and these are potentially the sorts of ramifications of its effect in the body. That just opens doors, and it's still, in a lot of cases, like we talked about, creative use of Cursor as a design tool. I think we covered that last week, or at least I discussed it with you at some stage in the last 10 days. And it's those things where we're actually using this as part of a team extension. So anyway, I've got some deeper thoughts on that at some stage if we want to chat about collaborative systems as well. Okay. Yeah, look, video's definitely on play. Google's Veo 3 challenges Sora and a bunch of others. So I think that there's definitely massive movements in that whole video space at the moment. And I've seen, I think, 3 or 4 different major updates in video work this last 10 days. Veo 3 is really, really good, but they're not certainly the Lone Ranger. I think I mentioned earlier in the podcast about Midjourney's launched their video stuff, which has got it's interesting. Each of these ones seem to have use cases and particular styles that they're good for. But again, if you really want to do some really interesting stuff at the moment, you're having to use this one plus this one plus this one. So, definitely spending more money on compute now than I was doing 2 years ago. Have you had to play with Veo or any of the video stuff?
I've got no talent when it comes to generative video. Like I feel like to use it, you have to have a really strong vision of what you want to make. I mean, I know you could just prompt it, ask for anything, but if I were to actually sit down and use it, I'd want to be trying to make something, and I just do robot stuff, man. I don't make videos like crazy creative, let's have a kung fu guy eating noodles flying through the air and now suddenly he's on a boat. I don't know. I can't think like that. So yeah, I haven't really played
Well, one
too
of the
much
ways you
with
can
these
think, like,
things.
if you're saying, "Hey, I'm doing this robot project, how would I go through it?" So I'll start sharing some stuff about what I've been doing with regards to branding and visual identities and how we can use AIs in a chat environment to start to put down creative briefs and look at styles. So you can actually go out and find and use particularly search functions now as well to find particular styles. Well, I mean, one that's in the news at the moment is obviously the new liquid glass stuff from Apple
Yeah.
as a design thing. So there's definitely knowing those sorts of styles and then having them say, "Hey, I like that. Can I do something along that?" And I think you don't have to be that talented to sort of say, "Well, what's trending," and then apply that the other way around. So anyway, look, I think this was important because there's a lot of movement in video, and I actually think that there is a whole range of opportunities that'll grow in that space as well. So, cool. And here's one that I also thought was incredibly interesting. This is the Asia, Southeast Asian impact. India, Singapore, and Malaysia really starting to find some footprint in here, particularly India emerging as a sort of a primary AI infrastructure destination with data centers. AWS, Amazon have thrown a bunch of money in that direction. There's a lot of work in all of these three areas here, even though they're not necessarily foundation models. India is probably the most dynamic in terms of utilization of AI into businesses and building applications with AI as part of their processes. So I don't know if you've been seeing, but a number of US startups have been saying, "Hey, we're thinking about doing this and having a AI doctor and stuff," and then they find India's had one of those for 6 months or a year and things like that are already way ahead of there. So it's interesting to see. My only last comment before I throw to you, John, is Australia's nowhere, like literally absolutely nowhere here, and I don't know where we do this. Maybe talking to Paul would be a key component, because I know that part of that is what we think we want to do in this space and build off some of our particular natural tendencies, if not strengths. And we need to be somewhere here, because at the moment we're not even a dot on the back of a gnat at the moment. So, John, you got anything to add here?
Oh no, it's good. It's a good thing, and I do think we should invest more in Australia. But I still wonder, like, what if we're able to make models that are more edge friendly, that are smaller. Maybe building a big infrastructure warehouse is going to be a big white elephant that, like, won't be that useful. If the NVIDIA GPUs keep getting better, or if the models keep getting smaller, maybe we won't need these things. So I think I don't know, it's hard to know.
Yeah, look, I think it's always going to be a hybrid model, but the issue isn't just about the infrastructure. I mean, if you look at the Singapore is putting it forward as a strategic, so more of a service-driven rather than a physical infrastructure hub, and saying we're supporting initiatives that are investing and setting themselves up as an AI investment hub. So it's not just about data centers. I don't think that's the situation, but just to sit back and say it'll happen naturally, and we don't have to do anything that's infrastructurally ambitious. And I don't mean infrastructure in terms of just building dams or stuff, though having cheap energy would help. But we have to do something. Yeah. So anyway, it's good to see it's not all in the US and China. So I think we touched on that last week as well. But I thought I'd raise up the fact that that's actually happening here. So we only scratched the surface. As usual, every week has got absolutely crazy lot of things happening in the space. So everyone's spending big. I think probably the only other one I wanted to call out of these ones ones we didn't cover, but there is the interesting Samsung and pre-installing Perplexity is going forward. So there's a partnership between Samsung and Perplexity, which I think is really, really, really interesting. So, again, probably echoes back to the beginning. We're talking about these alliances and people starting to put stuff together. Even Atlassian ended up buying a company here out of Sydney, which is doing some interesting stuff as well. I can't remember what the company off the top of my head, but everyone's looking for those little guys that have got a nugget of an idea that might mean something. So, anything else you want to cover, which you saw in the news this week?
Well, no, we've got one spicy question that I did see in the news, but we'll do that next.
Okay. Well, that was a formal AI noise of the week. Let's move on to here. And yep, everyone's here, guys. So
put yourself in the middle there, Paul.
Yeah, you want to come up? We want to introduce you. And Paul, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, make yourself bigger. We'll do a bit of an introduction and chat about you and what you're doing in the AI space for a little bit, if that's good to go. So, can you make your head bigger?
I'm trying to make my head bigger.
You're probably behind things, so you might want to just click on it and
click on your face again.
There you go. And now you should be able to make yourself bigger now. Not too big. We don't want to scare people. Both of our listeners.
Oh.
You have got a heavy hand there. So anyway, John, would you like to introduce Paul to our listeners, or plural?
Our illustrious listener. Thank you. So Paul Lucy. Oh gosh, how to start? Paul Lucy is a serial entrepreneur, all out ideas man. He's a guy who can take a crazy idea and run with it. He's got experience across mining and robotics and AI, and he's a pretty interesting cat. I don't know if that isn't a right intro for you, or
I think
you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think we could probably just talk a little bit about some of the roles he's played, and maybe quickly chat about why is he here? Why are the three of us here today? I think that's probably worth introducing what's happening with the joint project.
All right, cool. Well, so we are three of us starting a little initiative called Kaiketsu with a company called Project 412. We're hoping to change the way that people do look at automation in this space of how, obviously LLMs are helping to automate and improve things, looking at systems and people and processes and finding ways to make things better in a kind of a structured sense. And something which I've learned actually over playing with AIs is that you need to give them structure and small goals. And so the thing we're putting together is a way of doing that for anything. And in particular, we're looking in the mining space, looking at electrification and these sorts of spaces. And so, this is sort of very much a brainchild of Paul, and we're here to turn this thing into reality.
So, Paul, do you want to tell us? I mean, give us a little bit of background, because I know you've had massive experience in this innovation in the mining sector, and why you think electrification, and particularly paired with automation and AI, is the right thing for us to be doing here, particularly in West Australia at the moment. Because as we said in that previous slide, we're not on that circle, so we have to play to our strengths. So why do you think it's in this space? Can you maybe put some color on that for us?
Yeah. So if I go back to my background, and so I've been in the resource sector for most of my career, since 1990. It gives away my vintage, and mostly in energy and process control, and then later on automation and robotics, because that's how the technology evolved. I used to head up innovation and technology for Goldfields, multinational gold mine. where I was exposed to a range of technologies globally, and did a bunch of work with Carnegie Mellon Robotics on computer vision and robotics, which was quite interesting. Which led to one of my early startups, Mind Vision Systems, where I left Goldfields and actually went and created that in Pittsburgh. And it was interesting you were talking about AI and AI development beforehand. So way back in 2015, when this stuff was hard. I mean, it's hard now, but it's hard in a different way. I think you can see how things evolve. And so I'm always interested when people talk about, when this new trend will take over and be doing stuff in 10 years. So if I look back 10 years ago, in terms of what we were doing then, and so when we talk about edge computing, to process our edge computing, we had to cart around what we called the laptop, which weighed 32 kilos. In a big metal box. We used to take that as carry-on a plane, and pretend it wasn't heavy. But that's the kind of stuff that we did. And I think we had aspirations of where we thought technology would go in 10 years' time. I mean, we were completely wrong, as you are. It hasn't advanced as much as what we thought it would in some ways, and other things it has advanced more in some other aspects, which is always interesting in how these things develop. And I think that got my interest in terms of what you could do. I took a side journey into autonomous vehicles there for a while, which I dragged John in there for a good time. I'm not sure it was a good time, but anyway, it was at least interesting.
It was interesting
that we did. Now I left that and actually got back into electrification, mainly due to COVID. Actually, if I think about it, I was looking for something to do during COVID because you couldn't travel anywhere, and I was looking at the next big trends. We knew decarbonisation was a challenge for mining, and it would take some time. And looking at the legislation, we thought, well, this is probably the next best thing. And so I created the Electric Mine Consortium with VCI, and that ran for a few years. And that was initially quite successful. It turns out that electrification is like really, really hard to do for heavy equipment. It's not like electric vehicles. And electric vehicles, they seem rather ubiquitous today, but that was a 10, 15-year journey to get there as well. So these things don't happen overnight.
Paul, I got a question on that, Paul. I noticed that when they talk about electrification, and particularly even for the grid, one of the problems is getting that higher power use for manufacturing use cases to get to temperatures, etc. Is that similar for the mining utilization? Is it because the heavy vehicles require more advanced technology or more power, or are there constraints just because of the nature of the work or the application of the electric use? Or is it just the remoteness, or what are some of the primary challenges there?
You touched on two there. So one is remoteness and one is duty cycle, and I'll touch on both. So you go and buy a car today, you go and buy a Tesla. The duty cycle on that Tesla would be like 5 to 6%. Which means that the amount of time you actually own that car, you're driving it 5 to 6% of the time of its life. Most of the time it just sits around and does nothing. And when you do drive it, you're not driving it flat out. You're using about 20% of its potential power, and it's built that way. So it's got it's the electric motor in it might have a peak performance of 150 kilowatts, but its normal position is, or its nominal power is probably only like 35. And that gives you an indication of what it uses. Now, when you go into mining, your duty cycle is up around 50%. It's lower in some, and I think the highest ones you've got are like in the Pilbara at 64% duty cycle, which means that when you're driving that vehicle, you're using 64% of its potential 24/7. So you're operating at around 6,500 hours per year, and you're operating it at a high energy output, which means that it's much harder to find the time to charge it. So when you've got your Tesla, you get a fast charger, unless you're doing country travel. You'll just charge it up at home and you'll never notice the difference. So with mining is you've gone from a vehicle where you put diesel in and it doesn't take very long to fill it up and away you go again because you want 6,500 hours of operating time out of this thing. So all of a sudden you've got this gigantic battery, a 2 megawatt battery that you've got in this truck, and then you need to charge it up and you don't want to wait around for 3 or 4 hours for it to charge up. And it's an enormous amount of energy to go and put into that battery in a short period of time, and it has to be clean. So then you're going to go and put the renewable energy in, and if you're remotely located, you have to go and install that. Not only that, the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine all the time, so then you have to put in 3 to 4 times the amount of renewable energy in, and then put it into a battery, which is even more expensive, so you've got it for when you need it. So that's what makes it really, really complex and expensive. From a mining perspective. And so, when people talk about renewable energy is only 4 cents a kilowatt, if you have to go and build it yourself in the middle of nowhere and ensure that you have it 24/7, it's no longer 4 cents a kilowatt, and it's more like $1.50 a kilowatt.
Ouch. Yeah. Okay. And so then, from an AI and automation perspective, what are the key enablers that you think they bring to the table in this space?
So I think there's 2 things for that. So one is industry led. So, and by industry led, people are still keen on doing automation, but they only have money to do one thing. So they're saying we want to do electrification, but we have to do automation at the same time. Thinking that if we force one on the other, then we can get 2 for 1, which is not necessarily true. But anyway, it does drive a process. Now, the other thing is that mining is terribly inefficient. And the reason it's terribly inefficient is because diesel is relatively cheap. It falls from the sky. It's readily available. And it forgives a lot of sins. And when you're putting in renewable energy, the cheapest kilowatt you've got is the one you don't use. And particularly from an installation perspective. So applying AI to your current process to find efficiencies in the system is worth it a lot. So if you're saving 30% of your energy through being incredibly smart with your operation, that's 30% less that you need to spend on infrastructure. And if it's $1 billion to go and put your renewable energy plant in, that's $300 million you can go and put back in your pocket. So it makes a phenomenal difference.
Yeah.
And you can't get there with humans. There's just too many complexities for us to be thinking. You get some people that will do it really well, but you get others that don't. So you don't have that consistency unless you have the systems and processes to back it up. I think one of the things that AI brings to that process is the sheer amount of data it can look at in a very short period of time, and its ability to learn as it goes.
So one of the main differences, obviously, I suppose, if you're producing, sun comes down, there's a whole bunch of it around. With diesel, it sits in a drum until you use it. So you can use it whenever you want, and you don't miss the opportunity. Whereas with an electrification issue, if you're producing it, you've got to store it, you've got to make it available. How much do you need to store? How much till you can fill the tank again, etc. becomes incredibly complex. I think I get it.
It's far worse than that. So it goes to the point that in winter you have less renewable energy than you have in summer. Everyone's got an element of solar panels, and the sun doesn't shine as much as in winter, which means that you then start to consider how and when you mine certain parts of your ore body, depending on what time of the year it is. Never ever done before because diesel forgives all sins. So it's adding those kind of complexities that you need to think about. If you're smart enough, you will do it more productively, whereas you can no longer use brute force to do it. So they're the kind of the macro things, and some of the smaller things are things like monitoring your haul roads to make sure that you're maintaining the correct rolling resistance. So every percentage of rolling resistance adds a certain percentage of inefficiencies into your system. And the last thing you want to do is run out of power at 4 a.m. in the morning. So, keeping on top of these things is pretty important.
Yeah, I
and although
suppose.
you can train it to do that by eye, it's much easier to get an AI to do it.
Yeah, and I suppose and having the data and the analytics, it makes sense. I suppose the other things with winter and conditions like wet roads would cause more issues and stuff like that, mud and stuff like that. So all of those things matter. So sounds exciting. Hopefully we'll cover up a little bit more about you and your AI and about this project over the coming weeks, and sounds exciting, and maybe it is an area where we can see Australia, which seems to be mainly interested in primary industries, whether it's growing wheat or digging dirt as our primary asset. And we think that forgives all sins as well, because it fuels so much of our economy. Unless we build some of this innovation off it, I think that's the only leverage that we've got. I mean, Paul harks back to where we started when I first came back from Hong Kong, and some of the innovation initiatives we had with Unearthed, etc., to try and leverage the systems and technology back on the resource industry. So this is another opportunity. Just hope we don't miss it. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate your thing, and we'll keep us up to date. John, you have anything else for Paul? Paul, please hang around. We'll chat about some other things from here, unless you've got something else you want to cover off today, Paul. Or do you have any comments about news or general AI use that you've been playing with?
So I think
how's you and your AI? How's you and your AI been this year?
John tasked me there with trying to predict the future in terms of things which inevitably you always get wrong. And I used to try and do it whenever I did presentations in mine. I was trying to guess where things would go, and maybe I don't know, if I was good, I'd get 60% right.
Wow,
so there's a lot you get wrong.
Very good, yeah.
But I think, and having been in this space for a long period of time, like if you'd asked me back in 2008 when autonomous cars were coming to the public road, I would have said 2030. But then by 2015, I was saying, no, we'll have them by 2025. It's 2025, and we don't have autonomous cars in Australia on the road because our legislators suck. But that aside, what we do is we have the thing that everyone said we would never, ever do, and that's the level 2 and 3 autonomy. So things like adaptive cruise control, lane following stuff, which is incredibly useful and everybody loves it. And they were the things that everyone said don't do back then. So it just shows you where things go in that respect. But in terms of a long career in looking at the emerging markets and what's coming on, is the rule of thumb that I have used with various universities that does seem to ring true is if someone has written a paper and it's peer reviewed and it's new and novel, then it's typically 30 years before you're going to see it, regardless of what it is. And if you go back through the history of invention, that's typically true. If someone's proven it in a lab, then it's typically 20 years away. So when people talk about, super intelligent AI and stuff like that, if we can't work out how to do it now, it's a good 30 years away. And that's kind of where I think it is.
Well, Paul, I think one of the things that I find interesting here, and this is potentially where we're getting an accelerator, AI allows summarization, communications, collaborations, if harnessed correctly, to get more people on board. We've seen massively improved adoption of things like ChatGPT with much shorter periods for people using these things. Does that also help us in terms of maybe seeing it, instead of it's a 20-year, that it is the 10 years? Because this tool helps us actually shorten those cycles?
I used to believe that school of thought, absolutely, 100%. If you go back through the history of mankind through to the start of the Industrial Revolution, that time frame hasn't changed, like literally hasn't changed. And you would think we would have got faster and better, but the reality is it just hasn't changed. And so if you take a scientific based approach to it, the evidence would suggest that not at this point in time. Now there may become a point where you have the canoe tipping point where AI starts to do things that we fit outside the realm of humanity, but the humanity rules typically stay 30 years.
So you think it is almost a generational issue with just people not changing once they get over 35, and they become friction points. They want to, they become sticks in the mud, obstacles, or is it purely just the methodology we have in terms of being able to quantify, accept, make decisions, evaluate, risk mitigate? Is it the process? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a tough one to say. I mean, there are examples where things have progressed faster than that method has ensured, and so there's good examples of that. And that's typically a global crisis, like World War II and the atomic bomb.
Mm-hmm.
That was outside of that time frame. The vaccines, the RNA vaccines with COVID, was outside that time frame. So it requires a global effort. So that doesn't mean that it won't occur, but there does not seem to be the horsepower behind AI to currently do that. There doesn't seem to be a crisis that says we need to put all our resources into it. And there are a lot of resources going into it right now from some of the biggest companies on the planet. And it's certainly getting better, I mean, but it's not getting exponentially better. It's just getting better.
Okay. That sounds very pragmatic, Paul. Yeah, I think you're probably right, even though my gut is I'd like you to be slightly more optimistic. I'm getting old, and there's a few things I'd like to see before I die. and I'm not sure I've got 30 years left.
Yeah, I think someone said recently that when AI can do my washing, then I'll be impressed.
It's not that far away.
Yeah, okay. There's a difference between it can and that would be your choice. I mean, let's face it.
Correct.
Okay.
So when it can, when it does all that kind of stuff, then
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously there's fundamental changes, but you start to look at it and say, why would you? I mean, there has to be a problem with the solution isn't actually just almost a backwards.
So the one I like the most is a smartphone. So no one would have guessed the smartphone is the device that it is today. But it's you could even argue that it's reduced productivity of the human race in some ways.
It definitely could. Distraction. But you look at the investment that Apple has put in on its own into that industry. It's averaged $55 billion a year into China, primarily to support the production of iPhones and ancillary stuff. $55 billion on average a year for the last 10 years. That's a serious.
And what do we use it for? We use it for Instagram and Snapchat. That's the pinnacle of the iPhone.
I don't use either of. I don't use either.
All the things that you do, that is its main use: Instagram and Snapchat.
Well, that is the other interesting thing, though. We talk about people losing their jobs with AI, but if you look at the sorts of things that we actually produce today, very little of it is to do with product which is essential or requirements. A whole bunch of wants rather than needs, and so we have a whole economy around Instagram influencers and YouTube video producers like us doing this stuff, which is totally unnecessary. It's not going to feed anyone. No one's life's going to be saved. So these are new industries grow up. So yes.
Yeah, I like to call them the gladiators of our time. You could argue the same with gladiators. What do they do to enrich our lives? They just go out there and stab each other, entertain.
Yeah, okay. Basically, so we have these things that seem much more meaningful and relevant, but in reality they're just for lols.
Yeah.
All for the lols, yeah.
All for the lols.
All right.
Well, thanks, Paul. That's been great.
Timing,
yeah.
Speaking of time, we are over 1 hour now, just by the way. And we had promised our viewers we would stick on 2 hours, so...
John, I've got an idea here. I think we're going to actually release three videos a week. We're going to do the whole long one, and then we're going to cut it up into three. I'll cut it up into three. So and give it time. Here's the news bit. Here's some stuff here's some things how they can do it there, or something along those lines. I don't know. We got to come up with another solution. There's a lot to this stuff to talk about, and I think we do need to work out some other ways to try and distribute it a bit more effectively. But I think these things are are relevant, and I mean, good. I know they're good for
Well,
me. Um,
should we move on to the next question? I think it's a pretty good segue. The idea
okay,
of
here we go. You ready? I'll push the button,
using
and we're going
AI.
to have a fourth participant now. Watch.
Now it's time for the
You
In My
ready?
Opinion segment. AI is sparking heated debate. Does it make us dumber, or is it simply a tool that can boost our abilities? Recent studies from MIT and Microsoft suggest that relying heavily on AI tools like ChatGPT may erode our critical thinking and creativity, while others argue that, when used thoughtfully, AI can actually enhance learning and innovation. Today, Kevin will argue that AI is not making us dumber, seeing it as a valuable partner for growth. On the other side, John believes our dependence on AI is causing us to lose essential skills. Let's hear both perspectives as we dive into this timely discussion. John, can you tell us why you think AI is making us dumber?
All right. So that's my cue.
It is
And
indeed.
Paul, feel free to also kick in with your ideas. Basically, I'm responding to a recent study. I think it was, I don't know if it was MIT. It was a
It's
recent
both
university
MIT
study.
and Microsoft. Both MIT and Microsoft. They're
Yeah,
separate studies. Yeah.
it came out.
Yeah.
And so they did this experiment. They wanted to know, does ChatGPT make you dumber? And so I think the experiment setup was basically they got some students and they had three kind of ways of working. Students, one, and they took this test like 4 times. 3 times they had to use whatever they were assigned as, and at the same time they were being monitored with ECG to see their brain patterns, to see their thinking, how hard they were thinking, I guess. And the key idea was some people would just use ChatGPT to write their essays and to solve whatever the question was. Some people were allowed to use Google search to figure out the answers, and some people were not allowed to use anything. They just had to answer the question with whatever cognitive abilities that they had. So they were monitored during the study for the ECG, and then afterwards they were allowed to take a test a 4th time, but switching the tool that they used. So ChatGPT might use search instead, or might just wing it with their mentals, and some of the people using just their brain might use ChatGPT. And so the summary reports that I read from this article basically said that the people who used ChatGPT had the lowest brain activity while they were using it, and they also had the least attachment to the work. They were unable to quote things that were written in their submissions, and they actually, when were shown the words, felt like the words were not written by them. The search was, I guess, a kind of a middle ground. Notably, of course, the people who wrote their own stuff, they obviously had high authorship. They also had high brain function while they were doing the test, and they also were able to use to quote themselves, and they obviously felt that they had written the stuff that they had submitted. Finally, one other note that I saw was interesting was that some people in their 4th try could choose to use ChatGPT after having done it all mentally, and those people seemed to maintain their cognitive functions. They were still actively engaged in the process, even though they were using ChatGPT, like the people who were not. And so this sort of suggests that perhaps just like TikTok and Snapchat and Twitter, where we're scrolling, that using AIs to do work for us, in these sorts of settings is actually a problem. It's going to make us dumber, make us less productive, make us less engaged, and ultimately, I guess so. I think this has two consequences. So the first one is that because chatbots tend to interpret across domains, like they sort of interpolate, and so when you get to the boundary of a chatbot's knowledge, when you're at the frontier of knowledge, they're going to struggle, and that's the point where a human needs to come in and kind of try to invent stuff and be at the boundary. And that's where the benefits of human AI really is going to find itself. But if you have trained yourself to not think very hard, by the time you get to the boundary, you'll be as good or perhaps worse than the AIs at those boundary places. And so it'll mean that you'll be less good at solving new problems. That's my first point. yeah, I can't remember my second point. Maybe I've been using ChatGPT too much.
Look, can I let me just respond to that, John? You can come back with
Yeah.
another one, but I think the issue here and the problem I have with a lot of these research studies is that they have design, what I call design bias. So if you're doing a topic and you're interested in it and you're actually passionate about the outcome, and so there's a care factor, or you just got to actually dig a hole and put it in a wheelbarrow and actually dump it in the street and get rid of it. And you just, it's a task to be done. There's no question the effort and retention about one thing is going to be completely different. So the attitude of it is, yes, guess what? If you're doing it manually and digging shovels and putting it in a wheelbarrow and using your manual power and put it up, get rid of it and all the rest of it, there's a lot more energy and engagement as a body, not just mind, but a whole body into that task. But the reality is, if I can use a backhoe and do the same thing with some mechanism, doesn't mean that the hole doesn't get dug, that the sand doesn't get moved. And if the only outcome I care about that is the consequence, the outcome, they don't care. But if I really want to, if I want to sculpt something, I'm really passionate about sculpting something out of clay, and I've made my own clay, and I want to give up. I'm engaged in that process, and I think if we don't have design systems that talk about that, is it purely we need to get to point A to point B, we need to do this, get this task and get it done. We are looking for the easiest pathway to do that, and we're looking for the least energy, whether it's electrical energy, diesel energy, human energy, brain power, to achieve the outcome. And if we think that just because we sweated digging the hole, that somehow it's more relevant, more beneficial to me as an individual, for me as a society or my family, because I actually took longer, expended more calories, etc., then I think that we're missing the point. I mean, there are all sorts of skills that we've lost over the years. I mean, there are a lot more people that knew how to do metallurgy or become a blacksmith or could work on farms and know about husbandry and growing poultry. Most people don't understand and have any of those skills. But if they're not skills that are essential for them as individuals or families or as a community as a whole, when we had, what was it, 70, 90% of people used to work in agriculture. Now and I think it's in single digits. So I think it's just absolutely dumb, stupid, idiotic study that again just feeds into headline inducing engagements and driven back to the mind numbing idea that either in press or TikToks that people will react to. It's nothing more than that.
I don't know. I'm worried. But okay, Paul, yeah, go.
Yeah, so I think what it does is it can inhibit your development, and so to use some.
But it could also be an awesome training tool. It is an amazing way to learn new skills as well. So, and that depends on what your use case.
Let's let Paul.
So if we use the backhoe operator as an example, so if you train the AI to operate the backhoe, and then you say to the backhoe, dig this hole, that doesn't make you, and then you call yourself a backhoe operator, then as long as you've got the AI, you can always do it. The difference between that and being trained on a backhoe means that without the AI, you can actually go and do the job. So therefore, you have a fully developed set of skills. Now, if nothing ever changes, then you can ask yourself, I have an AI can do it. Why would I need to do it? I can free myself up to go and do other tasks, which is the very principle of automation. It frees you up to go and do some other things. However, you've then taken that to the point of as far as it gets. So to improve that process, you would then have to go and find another way to make the backhoe more productive. And I think that's some of the danger of you lose as part of that process. Now, we do that already in a number of things, but I think there are always experts in the field. But if you start to overutilize it before we've taken something to what we can deliver, then you might not necessarily dumb something down, but you might extend the development stage of a piece of technology or a task or something like that. So it kind of plateaus out. And again, we've seen that historically as well with automation. Is some of the innovation dies when you automate something, and the reason that does you do that is because you've already decided that you're going to make a car this way, and that's the way you want to make it. And if we use the automotive industry as an example, is the only way that the automotive industry changed. They changed for two things. One was style, because humans get bored of that style, and marketing says we have a new style. We're going to put some fins over here. Yeah, I like the new fins. I'm going to buy it because I like fins. But everything else was driven by legislation. So cars would have accidents. There was no incentive by the manufacturers to put seatbelts or better brakes. That was all legislative driven, and so then that drove the changes in models. And so you take it away, you take the humans out of wanting to make something better to the government wanting to make something better. And I think that's kind of where you get to in some things. And we don't have anything in the way of.
I have a counter argument to that, because I don't think it's, if we're talking here specifically about AI, I don't think it's AI. I think the issue is that we have, there's atrophy in systems, and systems, however you do them. You go to a company and say, well, why do I fill this form out? Oh, because that's why we always do it. Why do I have to have this information? Why is it stored in that file? We've always done it. So there's atrophy in systems. And as soon as the systems get repeated, whatever they are, the reality is it gets inertia into them, and it's hard to make those changes. And when the system, so it's whatever we do, whether it's someone else done it or the corporation puts methods, either documented or undocumented operating procedures. I think what we need to be doing, and I think it is important for us to be aware that this may add additional weight to this. This is the way we do it again. But if we're not careful, we're going to lock these processes in because it's just easier, or it seems to be easier, so we don't innovate. But I also think that it's also easier to innovate. It's easier to experiment. It's easier to trial things. And as long as we have the culture of curiosity, which is an inherent principle as well within people, that we will see strong counterbalance to it. And I think that I think both arguments are to some degree right. In some situations, we'll get dumb at it because it doesn't matter. And where it does matter and we can see it, there will be people who will push the edges, push for change. And the advantage of having AI is that we can actually prototype, document, test at such lower costs than we could previously, that the ability to convince others that a new way is worth it is going to be easier than it was previously, because we can actually have a much more fulfilling argument rather than, I've got this hunch, or I had this shower idea, or I think this would be better. And the risk and effort to try something different is going to be so much cheaper that businesses and individuals will try new things more often. And I think it's just a continuation of the same ramp we've been on forever.
I mean, I hope so.
Agreed. Yeah.
There is.
If you look at, sorry, go on, John.
So I just want a little bit is, I hope so, but I think there's risk. That the problem is that, and maybe this has always been the case, like maybe being able to grow a tomato used to be considered an important skill that everybody had, and that you maybe weren't a real person if you couldn't grow a tomato. And I know I've only vaguely succeeded at tomato that, so, but like thinking, I feel like thinking and the ability to problem solve, the ability to put down your thoughts in a structured way, and then to sit with those and work out how to express yourself, and in an effective, clear way. That is like that. John, I think is a very important skill.
John, I agree with you. But you're right off the mark. If we lose that,
that's your trouble.
You're right off the mark, though. That study that you're relating to did not support that scientifically in any way whatsoever. None. It didn't. Here's a test. Do this test. Use these tools to do that test. Use these methods to do the test. Which was the most productive? Which used the least was the most efficient? Okay. If the goal was to learn that, not test them, you have a learning exercise, you would approach that problem in a different way. Do you want to learn the fundamentals of those things? Then you could use AI in a much different way rather than just actually answer this question. And I think if you want to, so if you want to say, if the outcome is saying, hey, I'm going to test you on how well you know how to grow a tomato, in all the report, you're going to have the consequences is write a document that on how to grow a tomato, or you're going to be tested on actually growing a tomato. One,
Yeah.
there's a difference, and then the study if it turned out that everyone who used ChatGPT failed growing a tomato, as opposed to those who didn't have ChatGPT or the search, then I'd agree with you. That's not the case.
I'm just saying that thinking is important, and perhaps the study, didn't go there, but it's certainly trying to get there. It's taking steps towards asking the question, does AI make us dumber? And if they come out with a new study that is better, I think that it's. I just think that that's the thing we should.
It pisses me off.
But like, here's the thing, right? I reckon that it might happen, but I actually think that what we'll see is something that we saw in the physical labor world, right? So we don't like, till the fields anymore with like a hoe. We might use a whatever, right? But do you know what we have right now, which is really popular? We have gyms. People love going to the gym, and that's doing completely pointless work, lifting things completely pointlessly, but because we realize that as humans, we need to have muscle mass, we need to have all these things, right? And so we're going to physically train ourselves because we don't get physical exertion from our, jobs anymore. I wonder if we'll see an emergence of gyms for the mind, right? Where you will spend time trying to stretch yourself.
Wait, you mean like crossword puzzles?
Maybe, I don't know, like maybe something
and massive numbers. There's a massive industry in that already, John. I think the problem is you're thinking this wrong, really wrong.
Okay.
We talk about being dumb against a series of problems that are less and less relevant. So people go, oh, people won't know how to grow tomatoes. Okay, who needs to grow tomatoes now? So I'm dumb because you don't know about growing tomatoes. Okay, but do you know how to create an Instagram post? Do you know how to get your website listed? Do you know how to go build an online business? Do you know how to use a computer? Do you know how to be able to communicate with people around the world? Do you know how to find people that are similar to you that live in all different parts of the world? Can you convert English to Spanish? Can you have a relationship? We're learning a shitload of new things which we didn't know before. So we're dumb about the things that the older people think are important, but we're smart about a whole bunch of new things.
But all of the things you listed are all doable by ChatGPT. I don't have to think to do any of those things anymore. Like, I can ask ChatGPT how to start an online business. I can ask ChatGPT to translate this. I can ask ChatGPT how to set up an Instagram.
Yeah,
these are all things I don't need to think about anymore.
This is looking at it from an individualistic perspective, and it's the same argument from 100 years ago when mechanization took over. The loss of skills. People were talking about we've lost all our blacksmith skills because the machine makes horseshoes now. Oh, we've lost horses. What are we doing with horseshoes? So those kind of arguments. I think where the value is, and if you look at it, every key invention in the last couple 100 years is what it actually does. And so anyone who says it'll make us go faster, it doesn't necessarily do that. But if you focus on productivity, then that's where the tool is most useful. And we know we haven't got dumber over time. We do collectively get smarter. It's like the big crowd, if you like. And so if we focus AI on using productivity, that's where you get the economic gain, and that's where the value and the worth come from in that space. I think it's what you kind of want to use it for.
But I also think that we're going to see more people who feel more empowered to think more deeper, to try and work out all of these new opportunities, which are now seeing their reach. Is going to make people think a heck of a lot more. I mean, if you spend any time on YouTube, there are literally tens of thousands of people looking for smart ways to do things, that are learning new languages, that are learning all sorts of things. And yes, it might be easier to do it, therefore it's more reachable. But that doesn't mean you're not actually spending the same amount of calories in brain thoughts and brain cycles to get shit done. Some task, if you took a task and said, is it easier to use your horseshoe thing? You have a new tool, it's going to be easier to do it than it is to have to use a puffing thing to turn up the heat and all that. That doesn't mean you're not using that brain power to do something else. And that's exactly what these tools do. They free us up to do new things. And if we have the basic bandwidth and capacity to do new things, that's how new things get done. And that's where I'm saying the other thing is we talked about, innovation works at a sort of consistent cycle. If we get leaps, which we had after the during and after world wars, affluence of those sorts of social changes can add both in terms of so much new innovative thinking happening, and productivity gains.
What I would like to see as a society, though, is what would be great is if we go, all right, here's this big AI revolution is coming. It's going to make our jobs easier. We're going to be far, far more productive, and that's going to be great. But rather than do what we've done other times, then maybe we should just work 4 days a week and have 3 days off. Because that's what we thought. Things were going to happen 50 years ago. We were just going to work 4 days a week, but instead we just worked harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
So maybe we think this time let's get it right. Let's make AI make us only work 4 days a week, and then we can be on.
What is true? I mean, what was this? I saw that recent study about what are the biggest problem leading into this productivity gabfest and shit with the Australian government. Is one of the biggest impediments on productivity in the workplace is work. Because when you take less hours to actually give less hours to achieve the outcomes, guess what? You can get the outcomes done in less hours. But because we've got habits of saying it's 38-hour week, we fill them up with meetings and meaningless recitations and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we just fill up the gaps. We have 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. We have longer breaks. We have longer lunches. We have a whole bunch of 15 different reports.
There's only so many things we should give up.
Yeah. I'm just saying is we fill it up, and it's not that there. And if we measure productivity by the number of man hours to get X amount out, well, then we just fill in the gaps, And think that
I'd like to see it where we send our own personal AI to our meetings, and we let our AIs have the meetings.
Yeah,
and then tell us what it was about to them.
Well, I think there's opportunities for that, but sometimes you actually want to influence the direction of the meeting. So we need to make sure that we sometimes our AIs might make decisions. But again, I think there's definitely use cases for it. Absolutely. But a whole bunch of it is. But I think we do need to be more innovative about a goal setting where we have productivity as a central KPI rather than attendance. I mean, you're not going to get productivity measured by the hour if in fact there's no incentive to be more productive on an hourly basis. I just say I get pay on the basis of turning up. And how many people do you know, Paul, in the mining industry and these larger corporations that are essential to the productivity of the business? What percentage are actually doing the work? What percentage are actually moving the business forward? What percentage are actually making decisions that matter? Even if it's compliance type stuff, there is so much.
Well, like a lot of mature industries, and mining's pretty mature now, is you move from a very manual process to a very service based, and so 60% of the workforce is now based in services in the resource sector, which means they don't have a tool in their hand, or they're not spinning a wheel on a piece of equipment. They're providing services to the organization to do whatever it does.
Then we have to measure the services as part of the productivity goals. If a safer working environment, if compliance to regulation, to meeting corporate or environmental goals is key to outcomes, then it needs to be part of the productivity measurement thing. Because you can't just say we're going to add all these complexities and policy statements and all these services on there and say, guess what? Now only 20% of the workforce is actually doing the thing we measure as productivity, and the other 80% is doing stuff which is service support to that. It's just beyond ludicrous.
Yeah. A good example of that, and I think we have the technology to do it now, is this thing in mining called a take 5, where you're going to take 5 minutes to review all the assets and stuff.
Yeah.
Now you could create an AI that would do that for you. It would do it better and more accurately than what you as a human, because you become very complacent because you do it 500 times a day and you just start to switch off. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
But the AI would never switch off. And, not only would you improve your compliance in that process, you'd probably improve your safety.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people would oppose it, saying, safety belongs to the individual. You can't take it to an AI. But, if you get the AI and then you have to acknowledge what the hazards are, then it's going to pick up hazards that you wouldn't see or you become blind to.
Well, the other thing is the AI could do is actually seeing are these individuals actually are taking in? So you could actually look at even facial expressions. Are they listening? What are they responding to? There's a whole bunch of ways you can do that, which would actually be highly productive, because a lot of people do their take 5, as you say, and turned off anyway.
Correct. It probably wouldn't take 5 anymore. It'd probably take 2. But, so there are good examples in that service-based orientation where you could introduce AI that would make your job safer and faster and better.
And Paul, you're being much more practical about it than my esoteric rants on this stuff. But so I think you're right. The only way to get from there to actually do it is start to say, well, hey, these are pragmatics within the environment we've got, because at the moment you're not going to change in the short term how productivity is measured.
I have to admit, my initial reaction to that idea of removing take 5 was pretty negative. I was like, no, they need to have come up with the risks so that they're engaged. But maybe you could automate that process. On reflection, I'm like, there might be a way to make it so that they're engaged, but that you also have a comprehensive risk assessment.
It needs to be interactive. I'm saying you can speed the process up, and it can be a better process by having AI do a lot of the grunt work. Have the camera going around, and it's going to go, well, that, and that.
It might not be that the AI is telling you what it is. It might be saying, okay, we've got this one. Here's almost a quick quiz. It's asking, it's going, okay, understand it. Yep, done it. Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I'm saying, I'm just
gamify every system you throw at them.
Yeah, gamify it.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of funny. You're like scanning around, and it like goes boing, and it pops up this fun animation whenever you find a safety hazard. You're like, yay, 10 points. You have to collect them all.
Yeah. So anyway, again, it's one of those things you'd have to look at setting your goals and objectives really carefully. So is it actually finding the most safety hazards is the benefit? So suddenly you become unproductive because all your time is trying to find out things which could go wrong. So therefore you add into atrophy.
It's like Pokemon Go. Did you ever play Pokemon Go?
Yes, I did. My daughter was of an age where, at that stage where her and her boyfriend at the time got quite into it. So we actually had a bit of fun playing that for a little while. And I actually found it really useful when I would go shopping with my wife. When she was shopping, I could go hunt. I'd go hunt some Pokemon. Because I was surprised at how many supermarkets and shops actually had Pokemons in it.
Yeah.
So, where are you? I'm just trying to find the milk. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Actually, go to get this Squirtle or whatever. I mean, that'd be interesting. Pokemon Go, but for safety hazards. I reckon there could be something there. To be honest, that's a startup idea.
So basically, I declare that I won, and that it's not going to make us dumber. And I would even go to the extent that I don't even think TikTok and scrolling of death necessarily makes people dumber. We've always had, when we've got excess time, we find entertainment. Watching TV is, TV was, we can't watch TV. People get square eyes. They get dumb as heck. Doesn't matter what it is. Reading a book, reading romance novels. What do they do? I mean, the reality, we've always found things that are pastimes that don't intellectually stimulate us. And I think if you do it an extra 2 hours a day, doesn't necessarily mean you're dumber. In fact, maybe sometimes it's having that period actually, when you actually turn on to try and solve a problem, you're more likely to had the relaxation and other things to make it possible to do the work. So anyway, I declare myself the winner.
You may declare that. I mean, we have to agree with you.
No, of course not. Absolutely not. Actually, we should say to Paul. Let Paul be the umpire. Yeah. Yes or no, is AI making us dumber or just different?
No, yes or no. There's no or just different. You can't
I don't think it's making us dumber, but I think it could delay some some of our development you've used incorrectly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. I'll go cool with that one. John, I think I will go on to do the Replit thing quickly as well, and then if we need to, I'll probably chop this up. Or do you want to call it a day?
I think we're getting close to 2 hours now. We're probably at 1
Oh, we
hour
are
40.
too. Yeah. Okay, we can call it.
Maybe we should leave it for next week.
Not a problem. Okay. So thank you, Paul. We'll have more stuff, and maybe we chat about how we can segment this stuff up a little bit better, so it's a bit more consumable rather than this sort of 2-hour commitment. Because I think we're going to struggle to get it better. So maybe what we need to do is think of a format which is, hey, let's run through these things and maybe even segment it even a bit better, so we can actually have for not just shorts, but also have 20 and 2.
Yeah. I mean, I think this argument had to be pretty interesting as a standalone. So yeah, definitely. But anyway, all right, let's get out of here. Thank you so much for joining us on the You and Your AI podcast, Paul. I hope that that you and your AI will go on to have a bright future together.
Yeah. Thank you again, Paul. And guys, just after I go this across, I have something I want to share with the two of you while you're here. But I'll do it out of off camera. So if you hang around.
All right.